All right, everybody, welcome back to A Rural Music Teacher. This is episode 4, Teaching Band for the Chorally Inclined Teacher. I'm your host, André Wilkins.
And I'm also your host, Katie Oglesby.
Welcome. Why don't you hit us with our mission statement, Katie?
Yeah, this is a podcast where we strive to educate, elevate, and encourage other rural music teachers at any level of their career as we all pursue a fulfilling career in music education. André, what are some of our values?
I think it's important that we reiterate that we are a positive, solution-based, learning from each other's experiences and strengths, a safe place to be vulnerable with our struggles and figure out solutions together. And this is not a space to throw others under the bus, judge others, let our egos get in the way. You know, the goal is to stay a positive music teacher and stay in this career.
Help each other get better, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what do you think... we all, in Colorado, when you graduate, you get a K through 12.
Music.
That's it. Like, you're expected to be able to teach everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of us focus either on our instrument or our voice, and some of us feel inclined that we're more choral teachers, or we're more band teachers, or we're more orchestra teachers, or we feel more comfortable with elementary. So we kind of want to look at specifically secondary, middle school, and high school band programs, and if you're a more chorally inclined teacher, give you some tips so it doesn't feel so overwhelming. So we're going to start with beginning band and work our way up to high school. We're mostly going to focus on concert band. We'll do another episode on jazz, but here we are, episode 4, teaching band for the chorally inclined.
It's exciting.
Katie,
yeah.
Start us off.
I could imagine. I studied band, right? I was an instrumentalist, thought I would go into a band position, and then I got band and choir, right? If it was switched, I'm sure it'd be overwhelming. The person I took over from, fabulous musician, fabulous teacher, but she's chorally focused, amazing vocalist, and she explained to me how stressful that was, right? Getting into a mainly band-heavy job and seeing all these instruments you have to learn, teach kids how to play, that's very overwhelming. And a lot of people are put in that position in Colorado rural jobs, right?
Yeah. We
would start at a beginning band level program, and André and I were talking about this earlier. What are some things that can help a choral person get into the band thing? We talked about different books that we might recommend to you guys to look into. André, you have one with you right now?
I do. Starting Out Right by J.C. Milliken is an excellent resource that goes through each instrument that you are expected to teach as a beginning band director and gives all the resources, the best way to teach it, what accessories you need, and things of that nature.
Because really, the big thing, right, we all know how to teach. That's what we go through our programs, right? A choral teacher can teach anything. It's just learning how to make a good sound on an instrument and what goes into that, a quality sound, right? So a book like that will be able to help you if you do a little bit of research, YouTube videos, find your band friends, right? How do I make a characteristic sound? And that's what us band people are still trying to figure out too, right? How do I make a characteristic sound on a specific instrument? And how do I teach my students to do that? The nice thing about beginning band is you can learn with your kids.
Absolutely.
I love beginning band for that. Like, whatever method book you use, I love Essential Elements, but I know other people have other favorite.
I've used Standards of Excellence. Essential Elements, when I taught beginning band, seem to fall. They have a great online platform and access to videos, and they have a really nice scope and sequence. Standard of Excellence was great. Traditions of Excellence is great. The important thing from my perspective when I was teaching beginning band is that you used a method book you were familiar with, and you had access to the resources that are available to it.
And as long as it's easy for you to navigate that, then you can help your students out, right? And I got this from André, actually, when I started teaching. Every year, choosing an instrument to learn with the kids. So this year was trombone, and I'm still getting good at it, right? But
first to seventh position in the B flat scale sucks.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to compare what we look at as like a beginner choir situation and how it's similar to a beginning band. So, like when I was a voice major, and so a lot of the things that we focused around as a voice major, outside core literature and things, was breath support, tone quality, and like we would have vowel positions and how you would produce your sound, and difference between your head voice, your chest voice, and all these different things that I'm sure you're all familiar with. And I don't want to say anything too deep in voice pedagogy because I'll say something wrong. But band's kind of the same way. If we all look at the same fundamentals of posture, how to hold the instrument, or using our vocal production.
Breath support.
Absolutely. And then the other thing is like how to set your instrument up for the best possible to make you successful with your sound.
Yes. So reeds, tuning. How do you tune if you don't know what any of these instruments, right? Looking into the function of tuning the instrument. Do I tune the clarinet from the barrel or the bell? All of those things. But you can use your choir instincts to put into band, right? Also, like if you were trained in Kodai, if you have an elementary background, you can teach rhythms and notes the same way. Actually, I found a lot of success doing that with band and choir at the middle school level, using some sort of sequence like that. Or if you're not teaching 1, 2, 3, 4, and right, doing ta, 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 ti, ti, you can do all of those the same way and just put it towards band.
When I was student teaching at Lewis Palmer High School in Monument, Colorado, they had such a phenomenal band program, and Mike Mazingo, the band director, would use syllable counting even in his like highest level wind ensemble, and kids would be furiously writing in the subdivisions and the ties and things and the rhythms. So I totally even solfege
and singing. The best bands sing, right?
Absolutely. So I think using your choral background to your advantage. I mean, because when a kid pushes a button on their instrument, there's going to be a handful of notes that are just naturally going to come out, especially if you're playing brass and you deal with partials. We could have that conversation in a second. But, like, you set your kids up for the access to the information on how kids learn on their own really well. If you gave them a YouTube video on how to play clarinet, they would totally.
It's our job to give them those tools so that they can then just go off and learn it.
Absolutely. So when you have students that are able to access a handful, and you can't think of like a band instrument the same, like if you're like, we're going to do sirens on a woodwind instrument, and they just rip up and down the chromatic scale. There's a ton of fundamental things that go into like playing a 2-octave chromatic scale on a flute. You're not going to pull that off in beginning band. However, you could say, play your lowest note that you could play your highest note, and let the kids get familiar with their instrument.
Well, the brass does do sirens on their mouthpieces.
Totally.
And then they're learning kind of the overtones and figuring out how to work their mouthpiece, right?
So, Katie, as a beginning band teacher currently, talk us through how you're prepping your students to come to class prepared for you before you even see them in the classroom. Like, instrument rental night, those sort of things.
Yeah, so I start the beginning... starting them in April, right? You do the recruitment starting around March, and then they sign up for your class in April, and then I've already sent them out all the information to get their instruments and be ready for the first day of school. I honestly spend the first 2 weeks in procedures. I think band, it's huge. You have to have, especially beginning band, those procedures down, because you're not going to be able to teach them anything if they don't know how to walk into your room quietly, get their instrument set up quietly, all of those things, right? And have a good learning environment. So this year was very successful for recruitment for me. My jazz band went and performed at the elementary school. They got super excited. And then this was the first year that I tried out doing instrument tryout night. And I had some high schoolers, André students, and some older middle schoolers stay after school. They set up the instruments, and then the fourth graders, because we start band in 5th grade here, they came and they tried it out, and it was my students and my previous students who were the ones that were showing the kids how to play these instruments. Then they left. they chose their instruments, and now I have a full, beginning band for next year. I've already sent out the communication on, like, this is what you need to get before we start. Of course, we'll have kids who show up and they're like, I don't have any of those things, and then we can help them out, right? But the first 2 weeks of school, before we even get the instruments out, we're practicing walking into the room quietly, sitting down in the chairs, going to our lockers, and then going back to the chairs, right? And I kind of, in the last couple of years, I figured out, video games are fun for kids. So I'm like, level 1, this is level 1, walking into the room, right? And then we can pass level 1. And then level 2 is getting out our stuff from our locker. And then, so kind of making it a fun way where they're earning points or leveling up for each thing they can do. But I make sure it's like really, really sequenced, right? Walking into the room, then going to your locker, then grabbing your music stand, then sitting down, then making sure that your case is on the floor, not on your lap, right? All of these things that will help them get set up for success. And then in the first week, we're good if we're practicing putting our instruments together, and then just put it together, put it back in the case, and then we really just start with mouthpieces, and if they're a woodwind player, the mouthpiece in the barrel, right? Or flute head joint. And just learning how to make a good sound at the very basic fundamental level, and then start by doing that. And if that's all you do in the first week, that's amazing. That's a huge success, right?
Absolutely.
In the first 2 weeks, that's amazing, right? But it's like that little by little you're adding on so that they have a successful foundation for the rest of the year, right? Because that's just going to go into then learning your first note, then the first two, and going on and on.
I think it's really important to start kids off on, I always use the term their small instrument, and that would be like the mouthpiece, flute would be your head joint, clarinet, saxophone, mouthpiece and neck or barrel, brass obviously, you're just getting the mouthpiece, but also percussion.
Oh my gosh,
I mean, like,
yeah.
I think we got to talk about how, like, the expectations of a percussionist as a
Yes.
musician versus percussionist as a drummer, and especially in beginning band, that's when you could start teaching those skills. You could rent, like, one of the cool things with percussion is you could rent a snare drum pad, which is not very loud. It just sounds super, but it reacts the same as a snare drum. And then it's like a 2.5 octave little
Bells kit,
xylophone,
glockenspiel, yeah.
glockenspiel bell kit, and you're teaching kids to be music literate, not just that was tough, not just horizontally, meaning rhythms, but also vertically. Like when you read music, it's the 3D. You're reading rhythms horizontally, and you're reading pitches vertically. And so if the percussionist is able to read, I mean, like, I'll get kids that are pianists to try percussion. Piano's a percussion instrument. And so if they're able to play on their bells before they get to the non-pitch percussion instruments like snare drum and bass drum, that is a huge leg up as far as their music literacy goes.
I have so many kids who come in, and I'm sure it's not just a me thing. I'm sure most beginning band teachers have this issue. But kids come in and they're like, yeah, I'm a drummer. They think they're going to be whipping out, the drum set right away. But I use drums. I use the snare drum and the bass drum as the carrot at the end of the week, right? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we're focusing on xylophone, learning the same songs everybody else in the band is learning. And then Thursday, we whip out the practice pads and the snare drum, right? And then they're excited about it. But having that balance, that's what I found that works for me. And then the kids are like, yes, get to Thursday. But it might be a different balance for other people.
The other thing, as a choral director that is teaching band, when you think of starting off your choir, you think of they're going to be unison singing. And we're going to learn how to sing in unison before we learn how to sing harmony. The beginning band books are scaffolded a similar way, where you'll go through like number 1 through 20, and it'll all be
all in unison. So you could sing. I mean, I have my kids sing and finger along all the time. We go through the sequence of everybody clap your rhythm, and then sizzle finger, right?
Yeah.
And then sing and finger, and they'll sometimes it confuses them. Sometimes I'll have them sing their note name and finger along, but then you hear, 3 or 4 different notes all at once. Sometimes I just tell them to sing it on a law. But you can do that, right?
Totally.
And then, I don't remember what number it is, but then they start with duets when you start going into multiple parts. And the first duet is like whole notes and quarter notes against each other. So it's pretty nice.
Cool.
Yeah.
And also, it's important to acknowledge that in the band world we have transposing instruments. In vocal music and orchestra, we don't have the transposing that we do. There's a million different ways you could describe this, but the way that it's been explained to me that makes sense is if you look at a rainbow of colors, if every single color was a different shade, like if every color was green and it was just different shades of green, that would be all the instruments in the same pitch. But by having things in different keys and setting instruments up, that you have like a tenor in choir has a range that's their wheelhouse. An alto sax has a range that's their wheelhouse. And it's weird, like if you would have just a bunch of sharps and flats if you tried to make every instrument concert pitch.
Yeah.
And like there's like this whole like just learn about British brass bands and you'd be like, who plays tuba and treble clef? And like it's the same as trumpet? What?
Yeah.
Wait, tuba's a B flat instrument? That's C. And then you end up in this whole like join the Facebook groups and see the arguing. But the point is like when you're looking at your beginning band method book score, you're going to see the flutes with a bunch of flats. You're going to see the alto sax probably with 1 or 2 sharps. You're going to see trumpets with either nothing in their key signature or A flat or A sharp. And then you'll see trombone, euphonium, tuba, bassoon, and bass clef, and everything else is in treble clef. And you're like, this doesn't make sense to me because the alto sax has a similar range to the low range of the alto sax is the same range as the higher end of the trombone. Why are they in 2 different clefs? And like it's a crazy thing. But your concert pitch instruments are flute, oboe, bassoon, trombone, euphonium and bass clef, and baritone and bass clef. They're interchangeable in different parts of Europe, whatever. Google and enjoy that nerd fest. Tuba is a concert pitch instrument in beginning band, and all the pitch percussion is concert pitch. And then you have what are known as B-flat instruments, which they basically read your concert pitch up a whole step. That's clarinet, trumpet, tenor saxophone, and I mean, like, if you get in treble clef, euphonium, and baritone, which recommend going with bass clef first. And then there's E-flat instruments, which read, I think, a minor third above. So concert B-flat is a G. No, minor third below. Sorry. Boy, howdy, it's summertime here. Read a minor third below, and that's E-flat alto sax. And then French horns are perfect fourth apart, and French horns, wow, I recommend like just diving into the music theory aspect of French horn and
or not.
It's such a beautiful instrument.
It is beautiful.
I'm going to make my daughter play French horn for the college scholarships.
But the best way to make it simple for you and for your students, really in the band world, in the beginning band world, I would recommend that your kids know their concert B flat and their concert F. And make sure when they're learning those notes, they say, this is concert B flat. My concert B flat, if they're a clarinet player, is a C, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then make sure they write it in their book, right next to their C. When they learn the C on clarinet, they're also writing, this is concert B flat, right? And then have that back and forth. What's your concert B flat? It's a C, right? That's super helpful.
I mean, like, as a choral person, I taught beginning band and didn't necessarily use solfege. I used numbers, but that was another way. Like, if you think of transposing, like your concert B flat pitch, that's like your solfege do. And, we have fixtos and whatever. You take your own choral philosophy. But, I mean, that's a way to think of it and link it to choral teaching is that is your tonic, that is your bass note, that is the function of your literature is your tonal center. And then when you get in minor keys, it's a little bit different, but it's a whole nother world. And I really recommend trying to get through Method Book 1 before you move on to advanced, like, because you're going to have a full year of beginning band, hopefully, depending on how many times you meet. that's going to determine, like, there's the individual progress that kids go through in their method book, and then there's the whole band.
Yeah.
And so, like, once you start breaking out of unison and partner songs, as we would say in the choral world, and you start getting into band literature, we could start talking about middle school band and high school band and how we could start doing that approach. And there's some score study stuff that we could talk about in a few minutes.
How you slowly go out of the method book and into repertoire, right?
Totally.
That I feel like it's a leveled approach. You kind of they kind of layer over each other. I always the kids love their concert songs. They're really excited about them. So
to get a sheet of music is like, whoa!
Yeah, but the nice thing is there's so many. I mean, you can give them a super easy 0.5, 0.25, like a duet, and then be like, all right, woodwinds, we're playing part 1, and brass, you're playing part 2, and then you just learn it that way, right? Or we could all learn. I've found success doing that, and so they actually, kind of like choir, have the whole score in front of them if they're seeing the part 1, part 2, and then you learn that together and you put it together. I've had success doing that, or just like a very, very easy that lines up with your method book 0.25, 0.5 song that's around the same level as where they are in the method book at that time. That's kind of to show them, like, yeah, we can play a 3-minute piece, and then we can keep working on it. And then once you're done, I always really celebrate the end of our method book, and I take a full 2 years, or more like 3 semesters, to get through all of method book 1. I don't care how slowly we go. I just want them to really know it, right? Everybody in the room to know it.
And there's band arrangements in the method book too that are a great introduction for you as a teacher. If this is your first year teaching beginning band, don't necessarily feel like you have to get out of the method book. I like your idea of 3 semesters and spending all that time on the small instrument at the beginning and procedures, because that's going to pay off dividends in the end. I mean, you could either have, just like teaching choir, a very quick introduction to fundamentals, and then you're working on repertoire, but the kids lose out on their fundamentals, or you could spend significant time on your fundamentals and then really enjoy exploring repertoire later on in the semester. And just like any good ensemble teaching, like, don't skip out on the fundamentals in your warm-ups. So we'll go through middle school, then high school, and then we'll just talk about like a classic band rehearsal. That, I mean, like, everything we just talked about, you could apply to any level. And there's method books for advanced bands, and there's method books for intermediate bands, and you could choose your own adventure on that. And of course, if you join any of the various Facebook groups, there's always going to be tons of resources. Our goal today is just to make sure that you're not overwhelmed with the things you have to do. So if you're a flute player, and you're out of beginning band, I'm sorry, I'm going to take a step back. The accessories each instrument needs. Because this is always, like, when I mentor teachers that are choral directors, they're like, what do you mean you need to have, like,
extra
a truing rod or something? And, like, reeds, like, you have one reed. Nope, you have many reeds.
And you rotate them. But how would you know that if you're not in that world, right?
And that's what's great about this book, is it goes and clearly explains everything, starting out right, beginning band pedagogy. Jay Milliken is freaking awesome. But like flute, you need to make sure that the head joint cork is in the correct place, and there's a little rod that comes with that doubles as the cleaning rod. Clarinet, you need to make sure you have a ligature with 2 ligature screws if it's designed for 2 ligature screws. Your cleaning kit,
which includes a swab and cork grease.
Give us some reed brands that are good.
I would say as they begin, kids are going to break a lot of reeds. They're going to go through a lot of them, and that's okay. That's kind of at least that's what I found. You know, it just happens.
It's an expectation.
Yeah. So I don't push better brands of reeds, and I'm sure other people have other opinions. But at least in our community, I don't push better brands of reeds until we get into like 2nd year of band. So 1st year of band, I usually have them on a Rico. I like to start them on a 2. Some kids prefer a 1.5, but I don't want them to get stuck on a 1.5 because that's not good tone. They just blow
and those
through
numbers are the strength of reed.
Yes.
So like the larger the number, the harder the reed is, which for somebody that you're developing muscles in your face, your embouchure muscles, And so, like, if you're starting off on clarinet and you're using, like, a strength 4 reed, you're going to have a very difficult time.
You won't be able to blow through because it's more resistant.
And get the reed to vibrate. I mean, just like your voice, you get your vocal cords to start vibrating and blah, blah, blah. On an instrument, you're trying to generate enough airflow to make the reed, to make the head joint, to make the mouthpiece, or to make the drum vibrate to a pitch that's an acceptable characteristic sound. So 1.5, I like that you're starting off with 2.
If they're having a hard time on the 2, I'll give them a 1.5, but I try not to, just because I don't think it helps for a good tone. And then once they get into second year, third year of band, that's when I'm asking them to switch over to maybe a Van Doren, a slightly better brand that'll have a better sound. But starting the practices of taking care of your reeds, rotating through your reeds, and what I mean by that is like having a reed for Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that's our school week here, and making sure you're always rotating through 4 reeds, not just one reed that's going to break and then you're like, at the concert, right?
Yeah.
And that's for all reed instruments. Saxophone would be similar.
And I would have the same approach as a saxophone player, like start off on a 2, 1.5 if they can't be successful on it. And then, like, if you're giving school rented instruments, Yamahas and Jupiters are pretty common brands.
Yeah.
If your kid shows up with an instrument that is not either brass or silver or black for clarinets, like, you're gonna start ending up like.
He means a purple clarinet.
Yep. the ISOs, the instrument shaped objects.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that you find on Amazon for like $75 or Walmart or Costco, they're not designed to be taken care of and repaired and loved. They're designed to be abused and replaced. And, like, oftentimes they'll come with a ton of issues. Yeah. And that's a whole nother episode on how to get kids on the correct. If you find yourself a Selmer, Bundy, anything, that's typically a great instrument. Yeah. Yamaha makes great beginning instruments, Jupiter. And then for brass, you have to get them slide grease if they're playing trombone, and even like slide grease for the tuning slides on trumpet, and then valve oil. And make sure, like the Hetmans is what we use at the high school, and that super nice stuff. I have a ton of brass friends that say, this is what you need to buy. And I'm like, okay. Because that's like kind of the core at this podcast is you're not supposed to know all the answers, but you should be able to find... You should have a developed community where you can go and ask somebody.
And you can ask. And always feel free to comment or ask us. We're happy to help you.
Absolutely.
The nice thing is, I mean, YouTube's a thing now, right? Like, if you don't know how to oil a trumpet valve, look it up on YouTube. It's super easy. Yeah. Right? I have to do that for tying French horn strings.
Oh, man.
That's a whole different thing.
I have to do that
I forget every time.
So, like, some trombone players will use, like, a spray bottle of water to do their slide, and then after a while you have to use slide grease, and, like, just making sure you know...
There's so much you have to learn.
So much you have to learn. And we're not even touching on percussion, because, wow, that's a whole nother world. So, like, okay, you get through your first year of beginning band, you end up in middle school band, and you have a bunch of 7th and 8th graders that supposedly have passed beginning band and know what to do. What does that look like? Go ahead, Katie. No, you were jumping in.
I would say keeping the same procedures, the same standards that you set in beginning band. In my experience, 5th and 6th graders are perfect little angels, right? It's not until they hit puberty where they start pushing those limits. But then going back to the foundation of procedures that you've already set in the first year or two, it's going to be really helpful. Kids want structure, and they want, and they want to see that you'll push back when they push your boundaries, right? So knowing, like, nope, this is not how you walk into the room. We're not going to scream and run as we walk in the room, right? Let's walk in calmly. All of those things that we taught them in 5th grade, keep upholding. Same deal, first week. If you can't walk into the room and get out your instrument and your stand right, then that's what we're going to practice the first week, right?
There's a great book by David Newell called Classroom Management, the Music in the Band Classroom, and it's like all these like little tips and tricks for getting kids to behave, and it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But once you start getting into like middle school literature, and we were looking at like the score study aspect of it, those kids have getting a kid, and you deal with this in choir too, getting a kid to get out the right piece of music and know where we are, that's a big thing, like, too. Like, it's not, it's who we're teaching, not what we're teaching similarities.
Totally.
And so when you start, the way it was explained to me when I was in grad school and I started doing, like, these really intense score studies on these, like, grade 5 and 6 pieces, and it was way overwhelming, and I thought, I'll never be able to conduct this. It was, look at your band the same way you would look at your choir. It's not so much of what instruments do you have as much as what is the role of the instrument. So, like, if you look at it as, like, an SATB choral piece, who has the soprano part? Oh, well, flutes and trumpets have melody at this measure, and then it switches to alto sax at this measure, and then, for some reason, it'll go to low brass because the composer was nice and gave the low brass something interesting for once. And then who's got the alto part? Is it trumpet 2 that's playing the alto part? Is it alto sax that's playing trumpet part? A lot of times you'll see the second clarinet part take that alto line that you're creating harmony in, and then your tenor part is typically tenor sax and trombones, and then your bass part is bass clarinets, sometimes bassoon, tubas. And so if you start breaking down your score study of, I'm familiar with 4-part choral music, 5-part, 6-part choral music, how do I take these band instruments and assign them that role? So when you're listening to the band and you hear a wrong note or you hear a wrong rhythm, you could say, okay, I heard that in the tenor line. Let me go through my list of people that I have on my note here on the stand who has the tenor part of this measure. And that's an immense amount of preparation, but you get good at it after a while.
In college, when we started score studying for the middle school level, we did, like, color coded. So we would, 4 colors, and usually that's more than you'll have in middle school level music, right?
Totally.
And you'll easily see once it's color coded, like, oh, okay, these instruments share this part, these instruments share this part, and you can highlight it that way, if that would be helpful.
Totally. And then percussion, you look at how it's supporting the ensemble. When you start having timpani parts and you're like, okay, I'm not going to have the timpani played, but if you look at it, it's the timpani is being played on 2 different pitches, mostly like the dominant and the tonic, back and forth, and that sets up key changes throughout the piece when you modulate, and so on and so forth. So that part is actually probably more important than you're giving it credit for. And we're going down a rabbit hole that your first year teaching band as a choral teacher doesn't really apply. But every percussion piece, every percussion part was written for a reason. Every instrument part was written for a reason. When you talk to composers and they're like, yeah, you need a 3rd clarinet. I wrote the 3rd clarinet part. I don't care that you only have 2 clarinets. I need the 3rd clarinet. But I mean, like...
That's when you ask your middle school teacher to jump in on clarinet.
Yeah. That's what
we never give up. I really recommend to all teachers, never give up teaching the fundamentals. And I know you know this, right? Instead of, like, in beginning band, we're teaching it all the time, right? Throughout the class, because that's what we're doing in the method books. But then it turns into, that's what you do during your warm-ups, right? You're teaching, you're not getting rid of buzzing, you're not getting rid of singing, sizzling fingering. All of those things can still be used in middle school and high school band, and that's a great way to go through learning all of our scales, all of our, rhythms, clapping rhythms all the time. You can do that in your warm-ups, and then you can use those in your little toolbox as you're fixing things during rehearsal.
If you don't know what method book to use after beginning band, because there's the whole commercial side to being a music teacher where you are like me and you get 150 spam emails a day from different brands trying to start things off. There are so many different method books out there, but if you think about how you're going to set up your choral class and you say, okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on breathing. That's a great thing to do for band. Second thing is we're going to work on posture and getting our body ready to make music. Same thing with band. Then we're going to work on just warming up our voices, getting some air through our body. Same thing with band. And then you just work on long tones, rhythm exercises, technical exercises. One of the really fun things with teaching band is you could buy these chorale books. They're like 36 Bach chorale books. I think I downloaded off Google.
There's one for free if you download all the PDFs. It's free. I don't think anybody's gonna. You just look up 36 band chorales and then boom, right there for every instrument.
And it's like you could say, okay, we're going to focus on 4-bar phrases, or we're going to focus on 2-bar phrases, but we're going to crescendo and decrescendo between phrases. And you can start working musically the same way you would with a choir through those chorales. And if you did your job in beginning band with percussionists, they could do it on mallet percussion. One year, this is like the high school band all brought their essential elements. This is before you started teaching, and I was teaching middle school and high school. And it was really fun that we just had like an entire week where we did our goal was to like race through book 1, and this is like a high school band that like does pretty well at contest, and it was super fun. And
you just stayed on 58 Hard Rock Blues the whole time.
Dun, 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 dun. And like that doesn't mean those kids don't play with the correct fundamentals, but it was really fun to hear like a kid that made all state on bass clarinet all of a sudden go through their beginning band book, and they're playing at that all-state level, and they're like, oh my gosh, like this could be something. Let's play Jolly Old St. Nicholas on our concert. And like the biggest thing for me as a choral person that went into the band world was just acknowledging that all these mistakes are going to happen, and it's a daily procedure. Make sure you check your kids' instruments. If their reed is black, that's a bad sign.
They should be taking their reed off after every class.
Yeah.
They should be, and putting it back in the case.
Band is gross. I remember when we went in lockdown, the school nurse came down to me and said, where do the kids put their spit? And I said, well, it just goes on the floor. And she was like, good God. And I was like, what is that? It's going to be like a punchline in the movie of COVID. But when you get to high school, it's what I love, and this is what I love about having Katie teaching at the middle school. When I get my group of 9th graders coming in, and I'm like the upperclassmen are perfectly capable of showing up 5 minutes early, getting their instruments, getting their chair, getting their stand, coming and sit down, start their self warm up because at that point in high school they should be able to do all the things that you do at the beginning of middle school by themselves.
Yeah.
And like the first thing my kids do is get their tuner out on their stand, get a good tone, get in tune. Ooh, sorry, kitty. My cat Kai joined